What's good? It's Woog. We have a former unified champion who fell just a couple rounds short of becoming undisputed champion, taking on another former champion whose two most recent losses are to Teofimo Lopez and Vasily Lomachenko, who's now up a division and who's slowly drifting further out from title contention. Yeah, I'm talking about Jose Ramirez, 27 wins and 1 loss, taking on Richard Commey, 30 wins, 4 losses, and 1 draw. This is Jose Ramirez's first fight since his unanimous decision win over the very cagey veteran, a former belt holder down at 130, Jose Pedraza, and this is Richard Commey's first fight since a split draw versus the very cagey veteran, Jose Pedraza. So both Jose Ramirez and Richard Commey's last opponent was Jose Pedraza. However, it's a little tough to use that fight and that common opponent as being a measuring stick on what we should expect between Jose Ramirez and Richard Commey. The reason for that is because Jose Pedraza is a back foot fighter. He fights mostly southpaw, but is a switch hitter, is kind of a trap setter, a code cracker, whereas neither Jose Ramirez nor Richard Commey are back foot fighters looking for that counter punch opportunity. Both of these guys like to back you up, like to set up their big power shots, and if those power shots are effective, get you out of there. I mean, Richard Commey had very good punching power down a weight class at 135, where after a couple of close decision losses, I'm talking split decision losses to Denis Shafikov, and just before that to a former champion, Robert Easter Jr., Richard Commey then went on a 5-fight win streak that culminated in a title win against Isa Chinayev, knocking Chinayev out in the second round, and then a title defense against a very good Ray Beltran, whom Commey knocked out in the 8th round. So Commey had a bunch of momentum going into a big title defense, his second title defense, against a young and ambitious Teofimo Lopez. And that's the fight where Teofimo Lopez knocks Commey out in the second round and earns his first share of the lightweight title. So this is before Teofimo Lopez shocked the boxing world with his decision win over the great Vasily Lomachenko. So after Commey got stopped by Teofimo Lopez, he was out of the ring for over a year, because this is around the time or just before COVID hit. So he would return to the ring about 15 months later to fight Jackson Marinez, who we saw give Rolly Romero all types of hell. I thought that Jackson Marinez deserved a decision win over Romero, but they gave Romero the decision win. Well, there was no controversy with Richard Commey against Jackson Marinez. Commey stopped Jackson Marinez, pressuring him until he backed him up against the ropes, ended up finishing him in the 6th round. Very good win for Richard Commey. And then he fought Vasily Lomachenko, and this is when Lomachenko was on that 2-fight tear after losing the close decision loss to Teofimo Lopez, where Vasily Lomachenko would beat Masayoshi Nakatani and then Richard Commey, and Commey suffered a pretty bad beating against Lomachenko in that one. There were several points of that fight where I was really wondering, is Lomachenko about to stop Richard Commey like he just stopped Nakatani? But Commey showed a lot of endurance, a lot of resilience, a lot of durability, and made it the full 12 rounds, but he lost via wide decision against Lomachenko. And then Richard Commey went up to 140 from 135, and he fought Jose Pedraza in August of last year, 2022. And Richard Commey, I thought he started off pretty well in the first few rounds, but in the middle rounds, I thought Jose Pedraza started to take over. And then by the end of the fight, last 3 rounds, I would say, Richard Commey, after sustaining a pretty significant head clash where it cut Richard Commey's eyelid, and I do think that that impacted his performance against Pedraza, because he started backing up much more after that point. He didn't really see those straight left hands coming from Pedraza. Pedraza kind of took over it in the last few rounds of the fight, and this resulted in a split draw. So it wasn't as big a setback as it would have been if Commey had lost to Pedraza. But if he would have beaten Pedraza, that would have done wonders for his, entrance into the 140-pound division. And then Jose Ramirez, who I love watching Ramirez fight, a little bit less so in his last fight against Pedraza, because Pedraza can make anybody just look like a lesser version of themselves because he is so tricky. He's not the most offensive fighter, but he really just gives you a lot of different looks. He fights at different speeds, different paces. Again, he switches stances, and he's just one of those crafty guys. He could be a little bit tough to hit, and when the going gets really tough for Pedraza, he usually knows how to survive. I think the only person to stop Pedraza till this day is Gervonta Davis down at 130. So Pedraza's gone the distance against Lomachenko. He went the distance against Jose Ramirez, fought a close fight with Jose Zepeda. But yeah, Pedraza is kind of a tricky one. So again, it's tough to use that one as a measuring stick for this Ramirez versus Commey fight. But before that, for Jose Ramirez, ever since I saw him beat Amir Imam in a pretty close fight, it was a unanimous decision win for Ramirez, but that's how he won his first share of the 140-pound title. Defended that belt successfully twice, once against an aging Antonio Orozco, and then in a very close fight with Jose Zepeda, a fight that I thought kind of could have gone either way. I thought that Jose Ramirez finished the fight pretty strong, but moment for moment, minute by minute, round for round, I thought that Zepeda fought Ramirez pretty evenly. And it's still pretty crazy that we just saw Jose Zepeda get stopped in the way that he did against the very good Regis Prograis. And I hope Prograis is able to secure a very big fight. I was hoping that Prograis and Jose Ramirez could agree to terms, but because Ramirez is with Top Rank, Prograis is a little bit of a free agent. If you want to hear a good interview of Jose Ramirez explaining why, or at least from his side, why Ramirez versus Prograis or Prograis versus Ramirez, since Prograis is the champion, didn't get made, listen to his interview a few weeks ago with Chris Mannix on Chris Mannix's podcast. Ramirez explained his side of the situation pretty well from a business standpoint. But Jose Ramirez defended that one belt that he had earned off of Amir Imam successfully twice against Orozco and then Zepeda, and then he fought a title unification fight against the then undefeated Maurice Hooker. Now, this isn't the same Maurice Hooker who we just saw get stopped by Blair Cobbs, not the same Maurice Hooker that we saw before that get stopped by Virgil Ortiz Jr. Both of those fights were up at 147. I thought Hooker was at his best at 140, and it's going to be interesting to see if and how Maurice Hooker moves forward. But at the time of this title unification fight between Ramirez and Hooker, this was a showdown, and Jose Ramirez was a slight betting favorite over Maurice Hooker, but it was nearly even. Hooker won, I would say, the first 2 of 3 rounds. His coach was imploring for him to keep his back off the ropes, but in the way that Jose Ramirez will kind of jab his way into range, back you up into the ropes, and start digging to the body with that nasty left hand. It's kind of like a scooping hook type of shot to the body. Hooker started to back up against the ropes too much, ended up getting splashed on, hit too cleanly, got stopped in the 6th round. I actually think that that is Jose Ramirez's best win to date. Still, I know he's beaten Pedraza, he's beaten Victor Postal, a very good fighter, but I think that that win against Hooker, because of where they were at that time and what that fight meant, I feel like that might be Jose Ramirez's best win. So he stopped Hooker in the 6th round. So now he's got 2 belts, beats Victor Postal in a very close fight. This is another one that you could argue could have gone either way, ended up being a majority decision win for Jose Ramirez. And this was an aging Victor Postal, I would say. This isn't the same Victor Postal that entered the ring against Terrence Crawford a few years prior. And it's not the same Victor Postal who gave Josh Taylor a very good fight. But Jose Ramirez came away with that with the majority decision win. This was after being out of the ring for just over a year, again, because of the COVID pandemic. But then comes the battle for undisputed between Jose Ramirez and Josh Taylor, and this ended up being an excellent fight where Josh Taylor won a unanimous decision win, and he won it by like 1 or 2 rounds. There were 2 knockdowns in that fight where Taylor knocked Ramirez down. One of them was pretty controversial because the referee tapped one of the 2 guys on the back, so only Ramirez kind of broke or stopped his action momentarily, just long enough for Josh Taylor to land a punch that sent Jose Ramirez to the canvas. A lot of people kind of cried foul with that one, and I do see the argument for that. That one didn't seem like it was a fair knockdown. I mean, they say protect yourselves at all time, but the ref needs to be more demonstrative in separating the 2 and calling break equally to both fighters. But there was another knockdown in the fight that was a clean knockdown. It was kind of a pull counter coming from Josh Taylor. Josh Taylor, I can't wait for that fight against Teofimo Lopez, by the way. I can't wait to break that one down. Josh Taylor is a phenomenal fighter, and I just wonder if he is still operating at an A+ level. But Josh Taylor comes away from that fight with Ramirez with all the belts, and then Ramirez returns to the ring about 9-10 months later against Jose Pedraza, and then that's where he wins that unanimous decision in his last fight. So when I look at Jose Ramirez versus Richard Commey. Again, both of these guys come forward. Both of these guys are looking to hit you with their biggest shots. Their biggest shots being, if you're Ramirez, that left hook to the body. If you're Richard Commey, that straight right hand. That straight right hand sent Ray Beltran to the canvas, Chimaev to the canvas, and that's what he was looking to hit Teofimo Lopez with before getting hit by Teofimo Lopez's right hand first. And this is Richard Commey's first opponent in a long time that's going to be coming forward trying to back him up. I mean, you know, Vasily Lomachenko, once he cracks the code, he starts coming forward and applies immense pressure once he gets cooking. So, you know, I'll take that back. Lomachenko does come forward, but in a very unique way, very different than the type of pressure that Jose Ramirez applies. But if you look at Commey's, you know, most recent opponents, it's Lomachenko, southpaw, Pedraza, switch hitter, Jackson Marinez, a tricky fighter who Commey, again, stopped. But this is going to be a very different look for Richard Commey because Jose Ramirez is going to look to break Richard Commey, and both of these guys are going to look for some violent exchanges. My concern here for Richard Commey is that I'm just not buying his punching power just yet at 140. Couple that with his age. Richard Commey is now 36 years old. And yes, this Ghanaian fighter is super tough, super, you know, he's motivated. He wants this so bad because he knows how much a win here can change his life. And Ramirez is obviously super motivated. He wants to get back to the top after that setback against Josh Taylor. I'm just looking at these guys' heights. You know, Jose Ramirez is the bigger guy. He's 5'10" to Commey's 5'8". He's got a couple inches in reach over Richard Commey. So Commey has a puncher's chance in this one. And, you know, unlike his fight with Pedraza, where again, Commey started to wilt a bit, started to tire down the stretch, I would say, again, from rounds 8 through 10, this is going to be a 12 rounder. And the last time Commey went 12 rounds was against Lomachenko, and it didn't look pretty. And Jose Ramirez is the type of fighter who likes to turn up the temperature as the rounds go on. So Richard Commey, I think he's going to land pretty cleanly with a few of those right hands against Jose Ramirez. And if Ramirez is able to take that punch, which, yes, Commey's a tough puncher, but I suspect Ramirez has been hit as hard as he's about to get hit by Richard Commey. Again, Ramirez is the bona fide 140-pound fighter. And while Commey he's a pretty good boxer, he moves his head a bit, not a ton. You know, there are a lot of fighters who should move their head more, but I mean, it's easier said than done. You ever try getting in a boxing stance and moving your head while throwing punches? It doesn't take but a few minutes for your lower back to start tightening up just a little bit and your legs to start tiring just a little bit. So Richard Commey keeps his head on the center line a little bit too much, as does Jose Ramirez, quite frankly. But Jose Ramirez is a more sophisticated fighter than I think a lot of people give him credit for. And in any interview you hear Ramirez in, he's going to let you know that. He's been saying that for a couple years now, that people think that I'm just this pressure fighter, this come forward. You know, it's because people start using lazy phrases like Mexican style as if it applies to all Mexican fighters. No, you got several different styles of Mexican fighters. Like, I don't think that Virgil Ortiz Jr. fights a Mexican style. And I don't think Jose Ramirez, while he does have some Mexican style attributes, and he likes to dig that left hand to the body, for instance, he likes to come in behind a jab and he changes levels very, very well. And he'll start throwing feints once he's reminded by his longtime trainer, the great Robert Garcia, to start throwing feints and setting up the big shots. Basically, he'll start throwing feints and then he'll make a nice sidestep and then shoot that left hand to the body. So he'll sidestep, get himself in a different angle, and let a mean left hand to the body go. And yes, he'll also start throwing his right hand once he starts getting comfortable enough. He starts getting his timing down, which again, you didn't quite see that a ton against Pedraza, even though he did land cleanly a few times against Pedraza. But he does have a pretty good two-fisted attack. It's just that he is so front foot heavy and he loves using that lead hand, that lead left. And once he starts really getting you spooked to the body with the left, then he'll bring that left hand up top and start working those headshots a little bit more frequently. Richard Commey is going to be much easier to find than Jose Pedraza was. So if Commey doesn't hurt, and I mean significantly hurt, Jose Ramirez, I think that this fight gets worse and worse for Commey after you get to, say, the 5th round, 6th round. I could see Jose Ramirez really start cooking, and I actually, you know, I was thinking because of Commey's durability that he could go the distance with Jose Ramirez And you know, maybe if this was a 10 rounder, I would pick Ramirez, but via close decision. But this is a 12 rounder. And because I look at Ramirez as being the more physically strong and probably harder puncher between the two, and bigger and younger, Commey's 36, this is a 12 rounder. I'm going to go with Jose Ramirez via stoppage. I think he's going to stop Richard Commey in the later rounds here. I think Commey's going to put up a very valiant effort. He might have some pretty interesting moments where he buzzes Jose Ramirez if he catches him cleanly with that right hand. And, you know, Commey will throw a pretty nicely timed left hook when the opportunity presents itself as well. So the first few rounds I think will be interesting, but I think we'll know where we are in this fight by the time we get to the 4th and 5th round. I think that you'll start seeing the pendulum swing. If Commey has success in the early rounds, which I suspect that he might, I think that we'll start seeing things swing in the 4th, 5th, and 6th round. So I'm going to take Jose Ramirez via late stoppage over Richard Commey. But yeah, let me know what you think about this fight. It's kind of going under the radar because it takes place on the same day as David Benavidez versus Caleb Plant. I just dropped a preview on that fight. Please check it out if you have a moment. Can't wait for that one. And you know what? I'm probably going to do a live on that undercard. And there's also the Lawrence Okoli fight taking place on that same day. So there's a lot of action taking place on that Saturday, but don't sleep on Jose Ramirez versus Richard Commey. Let me know your thoughts on this one in the comments. Are you buying Richard Commey at 140? I just don't think that this is the best place for him. And with Jose Ramirez, if he does beat Richard Commey, which, by the way, if Commey does beat Ramirez, I mean, these are lopsided betting odds. I think that I saw Ramirez going off at like a greater than 5-1 favorite. I think that this should be closer to like 3-1, something like that. But, you know, Ramirez is rightfully the favorite. If Commey beats Jose Ramirez, that will be a big deal. But if Jose Ramirez beats Richard Commey, which I am picking him to do, who do you see him fighting at 140? I mean, the way that the titles are split, do you see him fighting the winner of Josh Taylor and Teofimo Lopez? Does Regis Prograis find a way to get into that mix? That's what he needs to do. He needs to get into the mix with those top-ranked fighters, because 140 is one of those divisions where top rank has some of the best fighters. I mean, PBC does have some very good 140 guys if you consider Gary Antoine Russell, Rancis Barthelemy, and PBC has two of the champions in the division in Subriel Matias and Alberto Puello. So can Jose Ramirez, or the winner of Ramirez versus Commey, get in the mix with them? Can Regis Prograis get in the mix with them? Another fight that I would like for, Jose Ramirez, if he beats Richard Commey, could be Arnold Barboza. That could be a good one. But yeah, let me know your thoughts on this one in the comments. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel if you are into the fight talk. I'm Woog. Thanks for tuning in.